light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. I was talking with a friend the other day, and the example came up of in discussion for whatever reason. It's kind of a complicated discussion, but the example came up of the DDay Invasion of World War II. This huge combination or accumulation or collaboration, I guess one could say, more naval vessels and infantry and more military might all brought into one place than I think had ever been done before, and quite possibly has ever been done since. But it depends on which record we're comparing it to, I guess. But whether or not it was the biggest isn't the point. The point is that there were hundreds of thousands of people involved in this military offensive trying to turn the tide of World War II, and ultimately they did succeed. But they knew on that morning, as they were sailing across the English Channel to land at Normandy and try to turn the tide of the war, that a lot of them would not be coming back that night, and that a lot of them were about to die. And not amazing, but the significance, the seriousness, the heaviness, I guess, how monumentally important it was, I guess, to believe in their cause so much that they believed that even if they died, that they needed to give all that they could in this offensive, that they needed to be part of a victory that they might not live to see. And all the families who lost someone that day, a brother, an uncle, a father, a mother, a daughter, because everyone was there and trying to turn the tide of World War II. And thankfully they were successful, but there was an enormous grieving, an enormous loss that had to be part of that step, and to believe in what they were doing enough that they would make that sacrifice and make that step and push forward in spite of everything. And to ultimately be offensive, to ultimately be successful in their offensive action, so that the Nazi forces from that point would be on the defensive. How do we integrate all that, and how do we remember our humanity in the midst of it? And over and against that, maybe not against it, but in contrast to it, there was a wonderful movie, a documentary that was made called Joyeux Noël, about the armistice, I think it was called, of World War I. That there were, because World War I was when there was all this trench warfare, and for years the lines didn't move. They just sat there shooting at each other and going nowhere. And then there were the problem of mustard gas and the biological weapons that were coming into, or the chemical weapons rather, that were coming into use. According to the story told in Joyeux Noël, there was this bizarre ideological battle going on parallel to the physical battle, where everyone on both sides had conditioned themselves to think of the other as an enemy. And then the war started and continued and dragged on. And remarkably, there was one Christmas Eve when, as depicted in the movie at least, the people back home behind the lines in the native countries, the Germans wanted their German soldiers to experience Christmas. They didn't want Christmas to go by without this, let the soldiers know we're thinking of them and we care about them, and so we're sending them Christmas. And so they sent Christmas trees and all sorts of things to the trenches so that the German soldiers in the trenches could experience Christmas and know that they weren't forgotten and so forth. And so, as depicted in the movie, they're having their Christmas trees up and down the trenches, and someone begins to sing Silent Night in German. Silent Night, of course, is an internationally recognized holiday song. And so someone in the Allied trenches across no man's land, where all the fighting was and people were dying, heard the singing, recognized the tune, and began to play Silent Night on the bagpipes. And so then you have this one Christmas carol coming from both sides of the war, and as it's depicted in the movie, the men on both sides left their guns, came up out of the trenches, and met in the middle. And over the course of the next few hours, in this unofficial ceasefire, in the middle of this battleground, they became friends. And then they discovered that it wasn't very easy to kill their friends, to kill their new friends. And so then one side told the other, there's going to be a bombardment at this time. You should probably come over here with us so that you're not in your trenches when the bombardment happens. So they all go over to one side and hide in the trenches while the shelling happens. And then the ones who were protected say to the others, well, you should probably come over to our trenches now because there's going to be retaliation, obviously. You know, and the cannons were firing from way behind enemy lines, way behind the trenches, so they had no idea what had happened. And so then both sides went over to the other trenches and basically just waited for the bombardment to end, and then they could go back to their respective trenches. But the whole point was that they had become friends and they didn't want to kill each other anymore. As individuals, their differences in languages and all this stuff didn't matter. They recognized their humanity, and they were willing to be in the midst of this horribly dark time where their leaders essentially had gone mad and were just insane. And in that moment, to instead be friends to each other and to share songs and to share news and to share letters, all sorts of wonderful things that wouldn't have happened any other way. What made the whole depiction, and this really happened, and what made the whole depiction so astonishing, and I think it was the director or the producer in the part after the movie explained that, yes, we lifted this text right from historical records. We didn't make this up. And because afterwards, the leadership of each side found out what had happened and were outraged that they could no longer command these soldiers to go into battle and kill because they were friends. So they had to take everyone who was there that day, ship them back and disperse them between all the other forces, because if they stayed together as a group, they would keep the armies from fighting, and they would discourage them from firing their guns and shooting and doing all this violence toward each other. But there was a scene where it showed that a particular Anglican bishop addressing the Allied troops, instructing them that they were to go out and kill the Germans, and that murder was what they needed to do, and that he, as the bishop, he was saying this is divinely sanctioned, this is God's command to you, etc. And of course, all the soldiers are looking at each other like, this man is crazy. This makes no sense. And I guess to me, the wonderful thing is that the armistice happened, and that it gave everyone in the world basically a chance to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out, what exactly do you believe in, who exactly are you, and what do you stand for, what will you actually defend? And maybe if we could all have that kind of dialogue, we would discover that we're not really enemies at all. We're just people trying to find a way to live, and each one to get his own needs met. And but it's one of those dark times, and of course afterwards, there is an afterwards. Thank goodness that's not where the story ends. And one of the interesting things in the copy of the movie that I have is they were mentioning about doing different interviews, and they received a letter from someone who described herself as the daughter of the armistice. And they said, well, how can that be? And they said, well, because they met during that Christmas Eve night, they became friends, after the war, there was a particular German soldier and a particular French soldier who had remained friends, and the German soldier went to visit the French soldier in France after the war, because they had both miraculously survived. And when he went to visit, this French ex-soldier, I guess you would say, renewing their friendship from the Christmas Eve between the trenches during World War I, he met the Frenchman's sister, and they fell in love, and he wound up marrying the French soldier's sister. This woman who wrote to the producer of the movie was their daughter. If it hadn't been for the armistice, her mother and father would never have met. And it's amazing how things get so turned around, and yet through this horrible dark time, there was this glimmer of light, this night where a star of renewal really shone in people's hearts, and it created a family line that will go on and on and on, specifically because of the two people who met because of that night and fell in love and had children and so forth. The last 5 years have been extremely difficult for me because of all the negative things that have happened, but there have also been moments like that Christmas Eve night where something wonderful happened in the least supportive circumstances. It happened anyway. There was nothing supportive about the circumstances in which the armistice of World War I happened. But it happened in spite of all that, and I guess because of that it seems all the more miraculous, but all sorts of good things came from it. In the last 5 years, circumstances for me have been extremely adversarial and devastating, and there have been so many times where I just wanted to give up, and I wondered if it was worth it, because I'm sending this out all around the world, and I get some response, but not that much. But it's still very much me struggling to integrate the hard times, not to just forget them, not to repress them, but to say, there was a reason that happened, I don't know what it was. But if World War I had not happened, and I'm not meaning to minimize the huge number of people who died and the loss that war involved, if World War I had not happened, the armistice would not have happened, the two people wouldn't have met, and this woman's parents would never have met, and she would never exist. I think and I said this to a lot of people when I was in theological school, because they valued their categories so much and they wanted black and white categories. And I said it may be that one of the most challenging things about life is that it is so mixed, that in every moment there is something bad and something good. There's some, and if you look at only the good side, I sometimes tell people in every moment is both a lesson to learn and a ministry to perform. It's not about only giving or only receiving. It's about being involved in both in every moment of life. And when things are so devastating and so sad, to do the appropriate grief, to mourn what needs to be mourned, to recognize the loss, and then to begin again and decide, if you will, that this is not where the story ends. And if it involves the loss of a loved one, that even there, it is not where the story ends. I will take the contribution they made to my life, and I will continue the story. Their story doesn't end with their death. It ends, if ever, somewhere down the line, because my life is different because of them. There was a very tragic moment when I and the maintenance man were the ones who discovered the body of a trans woman friend of mine who had committed suicide. And, was that the end of her life? Well, not really, because everything, all the ways that her life impacted mine, all of the things that are ripples in the pond, so to speak, that keep going. There was a song I wrote specifically about her transgender journey that has now been heard by someone in Canada and and it inspired him to think of his trans woman friend, trans man friend, and the struggles that that person is going through, that he is going through as he emerges as the trans man that he is, and on some level always has been, but we just didn't know it. These are the struggles and the hard moments and the dark times, but they are the raw material from which marvelous things can come. But we need to integrate them rather than repress them. We need to embrace that moment, however difficult, because it is that difficulty which raises us to the next level, whatever our next level is. You know, as I think back about the soldiers on the beach at Normandy, to believe in your cause, to believe in what you're doing so much that you know you may not live to see the end of the day, and to still know that you are so committed to being yourself and doing what you do that you charge forward no matter what, and you retain absolute commitment to doing everything you can to the very last second that you're able. I trust that there was no moment on those beaches where they allowed themselves to stop and think, maybe I should go back, because there was nowhere to go back to. They would have had to run back into the sea or try to hide somewhere or something, but to the best of my knowledge, that wasn't what they did. They knew what had to be done, and they knew it might cost their life, and they knew that ultimately it's about doing all the good that you can do for as long as you can do it. It's about ultimately showing and demonstrating with full commitment the sort of person that you are. It's not about the reward or the effectiveness or whatever. It's about, this is what I'm doing. And you know, I've seen various television shows where this attitude sometimes is put forward, that it's not that they know for certain that they will, it's that they know for certain that they will never give up trying. That as long as there is 1 ounce of strength left in their body, they will be driving forward. And in the same way as Sister Who, there are so many times where I have so many good reasons for giving up, and I know that I have to be like the men on the beach at Normandy and say, no, I'm going forward. For as long as I have 1 ounce of strength left in me, I'm going forward. And I understand that I'm doing things in a new and different way. I understand that it's very challenging to some people. But I think if they can get to a point eventually where they can consider what I've done and what I've offered and the symbols and metaphors that I put forth, that they may find more empowerment for their own life to deal with challenges that they will face in the future that they haven't even yet imagined. And if my sacrifice is going to make the difference for them, the one thing I don't dare do is fail to make it. Because without doing whatever I can do, there will be a countless number of people in the future who won't be able to do what they need to do. Every symbol, every ritual, every mountain I climb, it's all laying a foundation for what's going to come after me. And so I need to be just as committed and just as dedicated. But that means not trying to repress or deny or run away from the dark moments of life. That, you know, when it comes down to for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, when you're poor, when you're sick, when things are going badly, one of my favorite quotes, and a good one to end on, is from a movie, I think it was made in the early 1980s, actually, a long time ago. This extraterrestrial comes to Earth to learn what humans are like. And as he's about to leave, he says to a human who's speaking with him, do you know what it is about humanity that most fascinates us and why we would want to come here to study you? It's that you are at your best when things are at their worst. That is so unique and different, and it makes no sense. That when everything is so bad, that's the time when you are at your best, when you charge the beach at Normandy, when you invent something new, when you do whatever it is that needs to be done, and the course of history literally changes. It may not be obvious at the time, but it does. There are these small little things that happen in history, like the butterfly effect, the the idea that a butterfly flaps its wings and all around the world there's an effect felt. There's something that comes from every act of kindness and love and wisdom that has the capability of changing everything that follows. And so each time I make a show, I try to trust my intuition and follow my thoughts wherever they go, and put something out there that will hopefully be helpful to each and every viewer, whoever sees the show, and some who haven't even been born yet. And say to all of you, future generations are counting on you to live through your dark times and to be the beginning of a new dawn. I hope that you'll be faithful to doing that. Thank you for watching. I hope that some of the things I've shared have been helpful to you in some way or another. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen. It was a sunny day upon the beach, and the surf was a lullaby. I built a castle out of sand and gathered shells nearby. Then a quiet wave came sweeping in, and my work melted as it passed. I'd not considered how very short was the time my play would last. Can I trust the ocean's wave when my home is swept away? Does the sunset inspire gratitude as it ends another day? In the midst of loss, when I cannot see what the future will yet bring, resting in your love, dear God, I lift my voice and sing. The shells that lay yet within my hands were homes that were left behind. Pressed to my ear, their whispered songs spoke of times gone by. The sun was warm upon my skin, and though the breeze's touch was cool, yet others looked upon my play and said I was a fool. Can I trust the ocean's wave when my home is swept away? Does the sunset inspire gratitude as it ends another day? In the midst of loss, when I cannot see what the future will yet bring, resting in your love, dear God, I lift my voice and sing. What has been my home, like the shells I hold, travels to another time. May someone's ear be blessed to hear this whispered song of mine. Can I trust the ocean's wave when my home is swept away? Does the sunset inspire gratitude as it ends another day? In the midst of loss, when I cannot see what the future will yet bring, resting in your love, dear God, I lift my voice and sing. How is it that somehow I know, like waves, life will come again? The night will pass, the sun will rise, the dance of waves and shore won't end. Shaping, cleansing, give and take, as life continues on. Help me understand somehow enough to sing my song. Can I trust the ocean's wave when my home is swept away? Does the sunset inspire gratitude as it ends another day? In the midst of loss, when I cannot see what the future will yet bring, resting in your love, dear God, I lift my voice and sing. Resting in your love, dear God, I lift my voice and sing.